Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Zimbabwe is a failed state. We've said this so many times on this platform because it is true. We are a failed state. And the recent wedding of Tagwire's son has encapsulated the very essence of why we are a failed state. We have got the filthy rich ruling elite and their cronies. They are living in unparalleled luxury. Whilst at the other end is the millions living in abject poverty. That is the contrast that we are facing in Zimbabwe. And these lavish lifestyles of the few filthy rich contrasted with the sheer heartbreaking poverty of the poor is the reality in Zimbabwe. Yesterday, we discussed at length that the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 that has been going through the process and that the nation was engaged in ever since the 2023 elections and is coming to its conclusion is a done deal. And yesterday we talked about how Zanu PF, Mnangagwa in particular, imposed this system on the nation and how the basis for this imposition that Mnangagwa will deliver Vision 2030 is a lie. Today, we would like to focus on the issue that this Constitutional Amendment Bill is indeed unstoppable. And in this particular case, it became unstoppable when Nelson Chamisa and his Triple C friends decided to participate in the 2023 elections. At that point, from that point on, it became unstoppable. But before that, we could have stopped it. And today we'd like to discuss how we could have stopped it at various points, be it as Zanu PF, the opposition, or the ordinary people of Zimbabwe. Welcome to the program, Ben.
Good day to you and good day to our viewers. Thank you for joining us. You know, I've always spoken of an interview that happened just, after independence when Mugabe had won the election. The interviewer asked a simple question. There were actually two, where he says, what if Mugabe fails to deliver on the promises made? And the answers that came out there were very shocking. Answers like, he'll never fail. And I don't want to think about it. It just goes to show that we were incredibly naive to not think about, the reality that he could fail. And indeed, he did fail. We had no plan. And unfortunately, up to today, we still have no plan. The people of Zimbabwe, every time when we speak about the mistakes that we have made, the first answer you get from most people is, why do you like to deal with history? It's all in the past. Let's forget about that. What do we do now? We try by all means to wipe away our mistakes and never dwell on them and never do the correction. I remember in school, if you got an answer wrong, it was mandatory that you revisit that question and correct it. The people of Zimbabwe do not want to do their correction. Hence, when they go into the final exam or into any, life-changing decision, they will go and make the same mistake because they don't know the correct answer, because they never did their correction. 2023, or even any election before that, 2018, we were here saying the same very thing. Do your corrections. Zanu PF will rig the elections. You know that. And get away with it. And when they are getting away with it, they are also getting legitimacy. Stop participating in rigged elections. That is the answer. That is the correct answer to the mistake that you have been making. You get so many excuses for not doing that correction. And guess what? We are at that same final exam and we are leaving with a U or a D or an F, or whatever it is. We failed. We brought this upon ourselves by not wanting to do our correction. I think this is one thing that we must realize, that we can blame Zanu PF for dragging the nation through this hellhole and unending misery. But you are very right with the way you put the name for the discourse, to say, what part did we play in this circus? We were part and parcel of the madness. Since 1980, when that question was asked, what if Mugabe failed? We became part and parcel of the madness. And again, I think it's a very, very good question that each and every Zimbabwean should be asking themselves. What part did you play in the madness? Why didn't you do the correction?
I think in terms of Zanu PF itself, it could have saved the nation from becoming a failed state from the word go. When the nation gained its independence in 1980, Zanu PF, led by Robert Gabriel Mugabe, wanted absolute power. They wanted Zimbabwe to be a dictatorship so that they are guaranteed of power. One of the most important thought processes they should have had, but did not, is ask themselves the question, when the decision was being made to have an armed struggle, what kind of leaders would an armed struggle throw up? And there is no doubt that there is always a danger of the armed struggle throwing up people who would realize the power of the gun and who would be going into the armed struggle, not because they want to end the injustice, the oppression of the white colonial government. Yes, that is the immediate problem. But you also have a problem with leaders who, when they get into power, they'll become the next oppressors themselves and refuse to be accountable to the people. But if they have the gun, they can impose their will. So it is important to realize that this problem could easily happen. And I believe that is at the heart of the problem in Zimbabwe, why the country became a failed state. The armed struggle has encouraged the leaders who believe they have the divine right to rule. And the test of power and wealth has corrupted them to the point where they've completely forgotten about the ordinary people. And so when you're talking of Zanu PF and this constitutional amendment bill and why the country is a failed state, Zanu PF could have stopped it from the word go. In 1980, when the country gained its independence, instead of Zanu PF making sure that the people, everyone, every Zimbabwean had a meaningful say in the governance of the country, elections were free, fair, and credible, their immediate reaction was, we could lose power, and we are not going to accept that. And so their campaign message in 1980 was, if Zanu PF does not win these elections, the Bush war would continue. That was the message to the people. And in this case here, the people voted to end the Bush war. And as expected, not surprisingly, Zanu PF, as soon as they got into power, they went to the next step, tried to consolidate their power. And so we moved from 1980, within 3 years, Zanu PF launched the Kukurawundi massacre, whose primary purpose was to consolidate Zanu PF hold on power. They gave PF SAPO, the only other political party that constituted a serious challenge to Zanu PF, the choice of either disband and join us, or you'll be crushed. And in 1987, PF SAP finally relented and joined Zanu PF and signed the Unity Accord after over 20,000 people had been killed in the massacre. So that path of disaster is what led us to where we are today. This constitutional amendment bill number 3, which is a culmination of those movements. constitutional amendment bill is giving Zanu PF and Mnangagwa more dictatorial powers that they've been amassing all along. So to come back to the question that we asked at the beginning, could this constitutional amendment bill number 3 have been avoided? Could the nation have avoided it? Zanu PF itself could have avoided dragging the nation into this mess if they had wanted to. There are many other points along the way. Zanu PF could have stopped this madness, but they did not. In fact, the more power they had, the more they demanded. And so they kept dragging the nation deeper and deeper into this political nightmare we are in today.
You know, for Zanu PF, I think they barricaded the door for democracy from the very beginning. It was never about free, fair, and credible elections. It was never about passing the torch to the next generation and the next going on. I mean, look, when you are going into an election or into a sporting game or competition, there is obviously going to be winners, there are going to be losers. But the moment that you say that I am the winner, nobody else is supposed to win this except me, that competition is no longer competitive. It's now a dictatorship. I mean, we are asking for too much when we say Zanu PF should deliver free, fair, and credible election. I think that is just far too fast. Zanu PF in itself, internally, they do not have a succession plan. They do not have democracy within. Since the beginning, Zanu PF has never had a handover and changeover of power within themselves. They have killed each other. We all know whoever has seemed to rise to the top or became too popular has met an untimely death, a road accident, got mysteriously sick and died. We've seen whoever tries to ascend or make changes or threaten the hierarchy will go. So expecting them to then give democracy to the entire nation, that's asking for just too much. I mean, we always say, get your house in order, and then you can go and try and fix others. Remove the speck in your eye so that you can be able to see the log in the other. Zanu PF is incapable of doing that. And the moment at independence, when they said, it is me that was supposed to win, when Mugabe declared it is me that is supposed to win, that ceased to be a democracy. The people had no choice. And this is why we keep on saying, look, any election after that, we have seen how bloody it can get. Whoever stands and opposes gets a bloody nose. 2008, people were butchered and massacred. You're talking of, earlier you were talking of the Gukura wound. This is the extent that they will go. Massacre more than 20,000 people looking for thin air. When Mnangagwa took over, just after that election, he went and got soldiers to open live fire on citizens, and people died. That is the Zanu PF way of going about business. We cannot pretend and say Zanu PF could have or would have. I think Zanu PF is incapable of democracy. An unfortunate part, and my main issue and my main problem is with the people of Zimbabwe. We have failed to realize that whatever Zanu PF is giving us is toxic. Be it elections, it's toxic. Be it any command or whatever project, it's toxic. It does not go through. Zanu PF is incapable of delivering any meaningful change because it is not a democratic organization itself. How many millions of dollars have they poured into projects like Command Agriculture, Command Gold schemes, and solar energies, and all, even we go as far as even the land reform itself. Most of the people, the ordinary people down at the at the food chain, they do not even have title deeds in the rural areas that they stay. But the likes of Bona Mugabe and many other Zanu PF top chefs have got 3 or 4 hundreds of acres, and they have title deeds to it. In fact, some are already selling the land. Yet you and I, in the reserves, we cannot go and borrow money from a bank because we don't have any title deed to it. Zanu PF is incapable of any democratic process. Is whatever Zanu PF will hand out or will try to do to better, or so-called better our lives, will not work because it is the toxicity within themselves that corrupts any good thing that proceeds after. Corruption. The list is endless, Wilbert, if we are to go through how toxic Zanu PF is. Just the word, not even mentioning about the hierarchy and the organization, just the word Zanu PF is toxic. There should be a label there to say toxicity at such degree, purple maybe. That is Zanu PF. But the unfortunate part is the people of Zimbabwe have been kicking the can down the road. Ask the same question. What if Zanu PF fails? They don't want to think about it, and they kick the can down the road. Hence, we are living in this nightmare.
Well, this, where we have landed ourselves, could have been avoided by particularly the MDC-CCC opposition. They've been on the political stage since the launch of MDC in 1999. They had the opportunity to implement the democratic reforms, but they failed to do so. The main problem the opposition has had is that they're proven to be breathtakingly corrupt and incompetent. In this video clip, you can listen to Morgan Tsvangirai, the founding leader of MDC. Sorry, we're having some technical problems with it. My apologies. Just correct it.
Governance culture is just a individual with another individual with the same character and same culture. So I think it is foolhardy to think that replacing Mugabe with Emerson Mnangagwa without the fundamental reforms that are needed to transform the institution of governance, then you're wasting your time. You just have the same perpetuation of the same culture. Yeah.
What is interesting about that is that he clearly understood the need to implement the democratic reforms. And he had the opportunity to do so during the GNU of 2008 to 2013. 5 years. He and his MDC friends had the opportunity to implement the democratic reforms. The truth of the matter is they did not. They failed to implement even one token meaningful democratic change in those 5 years. Why? Because, like I said, they're breathtakingly corrupt and incompetent. And what these guys have done ever since have been replicating the same breathtakingly corrupt and incompetent. We cannot run away from the fact that they had the opportunity to implement the reforms, to bring about meaningful change. That would have changed the course of history for Zimbabwe and stopped Zanu PF destroying the country. That is a reality that many people out there have resisted, have refused to accept. But accepting it or not doesn't change the facts on the ground that these MDC leaders sold out. We have discussed on this program the number of opportunities that the opposition have had. And at the beginning of this program, I did say that the opportunity to stop this constitutional amendment bill becoming a reality, the last chance was in 2023 elections. If the opposition had not participated in those flawed elections, then Zanu PF would have been denied political legitimacy. And we'll be talking of something else now. They participated. We have mentioned on this program the likes of Chamisa telling the people that he had plugged the vote rigging loopholes. Zanu PF will not rig the elections. He even invoked the name of God.
Makorokoto Zimbabwe nokuti hakuna munhu anomira kana denga raronga plan. Denga raronga plan, denga harifo iri. Plan ya Mwari haifo iri. Ini ndatanga kugadzira cabinet. There is no way we are not going to form a new cabinet. There's no way we are not going to have a celebration. There's no way we are not going to have an inauguration. Let's start preparing for our inauguration. Let's start preparing for our celebration.
The truth of the matter is, he was lying. He had not plugged any vote-rigging loopholes. He also knew that by participating, he'll be giving Zanu PF legitimacy. They've known this as far back as 2013. I've often given you this quotation. This is David Coulthard, one of the leaders of the opposition, admitting in his book that they knew, he and others knew in 2013, that the election process was flawed. So flawed, so illegal, that the only logical thing to do was to step down. They did not. They did not step down in 2013, and they've been participating in these flawed elections ever since. Why? Greed. We cannot run away from that. And I believe that one of the problems we have is people pretending that the opposition did not play a role. The opposition have been pivotal in Zanu PF being able to rig elections and get away with it. That is the reality that we cannot run away from.
The people of Zimbabwe, they do not like to hear the truth. I mean, you look at opposition members, the likes of the late Morgan Tsvangirai, Chamisa, BT, and even the new guys, Fadzai Mahere, they have been placed on high pedestals by the people of Zimbabwe. They have used words like change champion, champion and in chief and all that day. And then, the question that one would ask is, what change have they brought about since 1999 when MDC-CCC came into play? The reason why I'm saying MDC-CCC is because they are the same players, basically. Just a change of name. They have absolutely delivered nothing. What then warrants us to give them that high, position, that change champion, when you have done nothing? It's like giving Zanu PF to say Vision 2030 is working when clearly it is not. The same thing with the MDC-CCC. Change champion. What change have you brought about? The name MDC, Movement for Democratic Change. Democratic change. Have you delivered on that? Absolutely not. Even though, now this is the part that is actually very disturbing. Even though you had golden opportunity to implement reforms, they did not. You're speaking about the period of the GNU, Government of National Unity, the one SADC set up. SADC made follow-ups on the implementation of reform. SADC kept on bothering Tsvangirai. Guy, you need to speak about the reforms. You need to take action on the reforms that we agreed on. Lo and behold, it was now Tsvangirai that went and told Mugabe that SADC is bothering me. it's very, it's very difficult to swallow. But the honest truth is the likes of Morgan Tsvangirai, Nelson Chamisa have just been manipulated. They have been manipulating each and every one of us, making us believe that they are fighting in our corner. Yet they are in bed with Zanu PF. These same characters have always been encouraging us to participate in rigged elections, knowing fully well that Zanu PF will rig and dash each and every one of us our hopes and our dreams. But within those hopes and dreams, we knew that they were lying. The same way Chamisa would stand up and say, I spoke to Donald Trump. He says he's going to give me $2 billion. And later asked, did you see the guy? He did not see him at all. Whenever you play that video, people get very upset. But how can you get upset with the truth? Would you be very comfortable being lied to? You know, the picture that you get of the likes of Morgan Tsvangirai, Savi was the best guy that we have ever had, and so forth. If one is to say, show me what he did for you or towards the country, there is nothing, because he did not change anything. In fact, he was more like Mugabe. And this is a fact. Him being sick could not pass the baton to the next guy. MDC was no democratic, party as well, or organization as well. They had no succession plan. This is why when Tsvangirai eventually then passed away, all hell broke loose. There was fighting for positions and everything else. Just the same way we see in Zanu PF. So MDC and Zanu PF were never ever different. In fact, they have so many similarities. You would say they're twins. They work hand in hand. And, even Mnangagwa admitted to this. They said there is no friction between us and the opposition. We are best of buddies. They are there just to oppose, enough just not to tip the boat, but just to show the world that there's some form of democracy. They are being heard, but they do not deal with the real issues. And then, the worst thing about a manipulator is, after telling you what you want to hear as the people of Zimbabwe, you then sing so much praise. Well done. This guy here is, true leaders. These are the leaders that we need. We see it in the posts on social media. Good leaders that we need. Yet when SADC condemned our 2023 elections, let's not go far, the 2023 elections, SADC condemned them and said that they were also a violation of our constitution. Just the same way Zanu PF has violated the constitution with this CAB3. MDC CCC members took up position on an election that had violated the constitution. Why didn't we speak up on that? So you see, we are easily manipulated and we take what we want to hear because of our desperation. Chamisa stood up and said, Makorokoto nyika Zimbabwe, you have found a new beginning. Cabinet. That is what you wanted to hear. But in reality, each and every one of us knew that Zanu PF was going to rig those elections and get away with it. And no one can deny that they didn't know. Because 46 years of rigged election should tell you that that was exactly what was going to happen. I think, the biggest letdown, to answer the question, what could have MDC done? The biggest letdown of all was trusting the MDC CCC to be the next best step forward. They were never a democratic institution as well. They never wanted to build a better Zimbabwe. They were content with what Zanu PF was giving them. The things like, MP monies, participation monies, and other perks, farms that are coming in, out right now to say they were part and parcel of getting farms. Mugen Changirai, $4 million house. That was what it was all about, and nothing to do with you and me. Because I will ask you to say, show me the evidence that MDC CCC did this to change Zimbabwe. Absolutely nothing.
One of the other key players who could have stopped Zimbabwe becoming the failed state we are the liberation veterans. Those who, after the war, the liberation war in 1980, retired to become civilians, or those who stayed on in various positions, be it in the army, the police, etc. They could have stopped the madness of the likes of Robert Mugabe. They did not. Because Robert Mugabe corrupted them just as readily as he corrupted those in the Zanu PF leadership itself. Zanu PF has managed to stay in power by using the war veterans, those who had retired as civilians, or those in the army, or in the police, the CIO, and so forth, to carry out its dirty work of denying the ordinary people of Zimbabwe their democratic right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country. One of the most infamous talks were given in 2008 by the army commander, Zanu, when he said that he would not salute anyone with no liberation war credentials. Anyone who listened to that speech and watched that video and have got a following or an understanding of what is really happening in Zimbabwe politics, you would have immediately picked the reality that here was an individual who was only repeating what his master, Zanu PF thugs, wanted him to say. But the fact that they repeated it, one cannot but hold them responsible for it. One of the tragedies is, of course, that the failed state has impacted them as well as the majority of ordinary people. Except for the few who were accommodated in the army or in the police or this other, most of the war veterans are living in abject poverty. Last year, one of the war veterans, the late blessed Bombshell Geza, dismissed this constitutional amendment bill, this drive for this constitutional amendment bill, as bullshit. He had countrywide support because many people believe that it was bullshit. They could see it was bullshit. They just didn't have the guts to say it. The only reason why Geza's dismissal did not get much traction is because, like most war veterans, he was only interested in promoting the narrow perception of Zanu PF must rule. He was not objecting to the Zanu PF dictatorship per se. He was objecting to the Mnangagwa dictatorship. He wanted Mnangagwa replaced with Chiwenga. This is one of the tragedies of the war veterans. Like I said, it started with the war itself. They never really fully comprehended the critical importance of emphasizing that we are fighting. We are not mercenaries fighting to end white colonial rule for a reward. We are fighting to end white colonial rule to create a just society. There is a world of difference between those two. But unfortunately, Zanu PF brainwashed most of these people into believing that because they fought in the liberation war, that makes them special. Here is one of the videos of the late Geza speaking on this issue.
aiwaga mirani kutauri imwe zvinhu zvinoitika hani ndiri kutokutaurira kurauza kuti hatina kupusaka because ndiri kutokutaurira kuti tozviziva takapusaka ndisikakutauriri zvese we'll deal with this situation at the appropriate time. But ndiri kutotaura kuti commander vaMnangagwa, right, navaChiwenga handidi, right, ngavadissolve polity bureau tikwane isu varidzi vechunhu, ngavadissolve cabinet inoti nana kazembe vana soda vanani havambozviutaga pane kupaniwa vana kambamura vanani why do you hate your comrades? Kune mageneral, kune retired CIO vakawanda, kune retired commissioners of police and other senior officers vakawanda havadiwe.
Maybe the president is looking at capacity and capability.
Bullshit. Vana grade 7 vane capacity and capability. Grade 7, oita busy yokwinzi nhasi aitwa minister of state mangwana provincial minister isiripo. We are not apologetic about it. Chinhu chedu ichi toda kutopinda ndoda kuti president vanipo zimota varipo ndoda mabodyguards ini.
But you've got your own cars. You've got a hotel at your house that you built in Sanyat. Why do you want all this?
I want to be rewarded as well, not to be used like a political condom all the time. I'm not a political condom. And urikona vana mahiya vaya vana vamwe.
This has been at the root of the tragedy of Zimbabwe. Those who had risked everything to fight in the liberation war, they've been brainwashed into believing that that makes them special. And when you've got that mentality, it is hard. It is not hard to understand why some of these war veterans have defended the Zanu PF dictatorship to the point of even killing innocent civilians. What happened in 2008? Many of the war veterans have blood on their hands. Many of the war veterans saw what happened, they've never condemned it. And this has encouraged Zanu PF thugs, the leaders themselves, to drag the nation deeper and deeper into this political crisis. And today, we now have this Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3, which is effectively going to turn the de facto one-party state dictatorship of the last 46 years into a de jure dictatorship. That is the tragedy of Zimbabwe.
You know, with this group of individuals, it's a very sad story when you think of the war veterans, because we need to realize that not everybody that went to war was fighting under the Zanu PF banner. Many loved Zimbabwe, that they just went there, you know, on a voluntary base. They weren't affiliated to any of the parties that were there. But unfortunately, after the war, for you to become a war veteran, you had to be, you know, affiliated with Zanu PF. Zanu PF twisted the narrative and the story behind the war, that right now we really do not know the exact story, because it has been diluted and politicized, you know, in such a manner that I think we have gotten to a point where we have destroyed and distorted the best part of our history as Zimbabwe. So we can label the war veterans as, you know, a group of people that have, you know, let us down. But it will be also criminal to paint everybody with the same brush. I believe there are war veterans that, you know, are really sad that, you know, after the sacrifice that we made, you know, Zanu PF went and did this to the country. There are individuals that are free and you know, and independent. And now what Zanu PF, for you to get the title to be called a war veteran, you have to be within Zanu PF card holding member and everything. And they have been indoctrinated in such a way that they believe they are also entitled. This is why you find the likes of, you know, Geza and many others, they believed they needed to be rewarded. And up to today, when the war veterans get disgruntled, Zanu PF quickly dashes them something, maybe a house. Mugabe gave them 50,000 that crippled the economy, and bicycles and balls and so forth. This is the monster that Zanu PF created. But like I said, the true war veteran would know what it is all about and why they went for the war and why they are fighting against it. But unfortunately, when we talk of war veterans, we talk of the Zanu PF version of the war veteran, the comrade they always tell each other in their party. And that is the wrong history of Zimbabwe, I believe. So, of course, they could have done more. But I believe they could have done more if just after the war, had they been reintegrated and given things to empower themselves after the war, I think they would have been in a better position to appreciate what they had been part of in the building process of Zimbabwe. But they were denied that. Instead, Zanu PF kept on, having to bribe them for their loyalty. And now it is bribes that they have become accustomed to. This is why you find the likes of Geza and many others that have spoken before him. They feel entitled to Zimbabwe. You cannot go into certain positions if you are not a war veteran. You cannot do this because you're not a war veteran. And most of them are actually not war veterans.
The last group of people who could have stopped this madness of Zimbabwe becoming a failed state and sinking so low now that we are passing this Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 is the ordinary people themselves. There is no doubt that whereas in 1980, when Zanu PF operatives in the field were telling people that Zanu PF does not win the elections, the Bush war would continue. At that point, yes, it will be very difficult for one to argue when you're looking up the business end of an AK-47 rifle. But nonetheless, people should have the alarm bells, set the alarm bells ringing in their heads. And the fight back to have their meaningful say in the governance of the country should have started from there. Unfortunately, it has not. Zimbabwean electorate have one fundamental weakness, be they in Zanu PF supporters or opposition supporters, is that we have failed to understand what is going on. The ancient Greeks, who gave mankind democracy as a system of government, found out those 500 years ago that democracy works if the people are educated, knowledgeable, diligent in holding the leaders to account. You need to hold leaders to account. The Zimbabwe electorate has never been at any of those qualities, even in this day and age, where we should learn from other people. We've lacked those qualities. We still regard leaders as demigods. One of the problems that many of us have had from both Zanu PF supporters and the opposition supporters is that each time you hold the leader, their respective leader, to account, you are labeled a sellout or worse. They do not bother to even understand or address the issues raised. One of the biggest annoying things was, for instance, this issue of Chamisa telling the people that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. Zanu PF will not rig the elections. Hashtag God is in it. He was lying. Of course he was lying. He had not plugged any of those vote rigging loopholes. But to get the supporters to accept, even after the elections, when he, Chamisa himself, acknowledged that Zanu PF had rigged the elections, the very thing that he said would not happen, to get them to accept that Chamisa had lied to them, that is a bridge too far. By the same token, there are many Zanu PF supporters out there who have supported this Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 because they believed the lie that Mnangagwa is going to deliver Vision 2030. We discussed yesterday that Vision 2030 is a mirage. There is no sign of economic recovery. In fact, there's no hope of economic recovery, given the level of corruption that is taking place in the country. These people, everyone can see it. The corruption is not a secret, it's there. And yet some people still believe that he will deliver Vision 2030. When you have got that level of ignorant, naive, and gullible electorate, that is a recipe for disaster. We should not be surprised that both Zanu PF leaders and the opposition leaders have exploited this weakness of the electorate. And the country has absolutely no chance of ever recovering from the economic and political mess we are in, as long as we have a gullible, naive, and ignorant electorate. There is no reason why millions of Zimbabweans should be this ignorant, naive, and gullible in this day and age. Forget the opposition, forget Zanu PF. Change, if there's going to be any change in Zimbabwe, it has got to come from the millions of ordinary Zimbabweans. Because these politicians will always exploit that weakness. As long as you remain an ignorant, naive, and gullible electorate, you will always have bad leaders. It is that simple.
You know, it reminds me of what the ancient Greeks said, that, you know, you have three classes or three classifications of people, you know, within a country. You've got the idiot, you've got the tribesman, and then you've got the citizen. And these first two groups, the idiot and the tribesman, will defend leadership no matter how flawed or how foolish they are. And we find that there in Zimbabwe. You know, if the threat is not from Zanu PF or MDC mainly, the threat is from the citizens themselves. Whenever you question leadership, let's say you question Zanu PF, you are labeled a puppet of the West. You know, you are a sellout. Whenever you question leadership in MDC, CCC, or Chamisa Morgan Changirai, you are Shigananda, you are Zanu PF, you are Mrakash. So all doors to any meaningful debate are then shut. And in shutting those doors, you are shutting the door on democracy that you and I so dearly need. So most of our pain and our suffering today is not caused by Zanu PF or MDC. It is caused by ourselves, self-inflicted harm. When we speak about let us not participate in rigged elections, we are not talking to Zanu PF or MDC, CCC. These groups will always want to participate because that is where their bread and butter comes from. They are benefiting from the exercise. They are going to win seats or the presidency, whatever. But you and I are going to bear the scars of that exercise. You know, you always liken Zimbabweans to mice, and MDC, Zanu PF to a black mamba and a cobra that are fighting their battle. And after their battle, whoever wins will consume the mice. And we as the mice are cheering on, not knowing or knowing that we will be dinner after that. We have had a chance to get ourselves out of this hellhole. We have seen what the two devils are capable of, but we have decided to ignore the signs and the handwriting on the wall. That Zanu PF and MDC are all but one. The difference is just in the names. And it is very sad that we ourselves have been our own worst enemy. And worse still, we will continue to be our worst enemy. Because with all whatever is fighting here, this CAB3 that they are fighting is not going to better our lives absolutely nothing. Because even if we were to stop CAB3 by some, luck, you were to stop CAB3, we are going into the 2028 election. Zanu PF will rig those elections. And the MDC CCC will gladly allow them. And they will get their seats. And life continues the same way. And we drift along. We should stop participating in these elections. Because elections are meant for us to decide who governs Zimbabwe. Elections are not meant for us just to participate and allow them to rig. That becomes very pointless because we have said absolutely nothing. Our vote is meaningless. I think this is the part that Zimbabweans do not want to acknowledge. And hence they have kept on dragging those that know down with them as well. It's quite unfortunate that you find that the idiots and the tribesmen will always outnumber the citizens. And in such cases, democracy can never exist, because one of the fundamental requirements of democracy is a people that are knowledgeable, that can be able to debate amongst themselves. Show me your evidence to support your claim and I show you mine. Not because that you cannot show the evidence, you label, you threaten. That is not democracy. And this is why you find a nation has got a government that they actually deserve. And Zimbabwe very much deserves a Zanu PF government because of the way we operate and do our thing. Sadly, but that is the truth.
The tragic reality for Zimbabwe is that ever since the country's independence in 1980, we have seen political decline. And Zanu PF has been at the heart of it. There is absolutely no sign of any economic recovery since Mnangagwa got into power in 2017. The country has continued to drift. If corruption was bad during Mugabe's time, it has gone into overdrive under Mnangagwa. And the individual has been spending billions of dollars consolidating power. This constitutional amendment bill number 3 is about consolidating the dictatorial powers. For Mnangagwa himself, to allow him to stay in office for another 2 years. Although he got into State House without the approval of the people, he got into State House on the cocktail of the 2017 military coup. The people had nothing to do with it. He rigged the 2018 elections. He rigged the 2023 elections. Even SADC and the AU election observers condemned those. But he doesn't care about it. All he cares about is power. And so the minute he rigged the 2023 elections, his next project was, I must extend my stay in power beyond the 2028 10-year limit. And he is now getting his wish with this constitutional amendment, bill number 3. That is the tragic reality in Zimbabwe. So this poster leading Zimbabwe towards a prosperous future is completely the opposite. The country is being dragged deeper and deeper into this hell on earth we find ourselves in. He's going to stay in power for another 2 years. And from now on, instead of holding elections every 5 years, the nation is being told that we'll hold elections every 7 years. So you elect these officials, even if you don't like them, you're stuck with them for 7 years. That is the reality. And by the way, when you say elect, as we have said on this program before, Zimbabwe has never held free, fair, and credible elections. There will still be rigging elections. Those elections will be meaningless. This Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 is giving Zanu PF even greater opportunities to rig future elections. That is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. We could have avoided it. We did not. And now the need to dig ourselves out of this hellhole is even more urgent than ever. I think in future we'll be looking at how can we dig ourselves out of the mess we are in. That is going to be a serious challenge. But thank you very much for joining us for today, and hope you'll be able to join us again in future as we try to find out a way out of this mess. We have to find ourselves out of this mess. It's going to be tough. It's even tougher than ever before. But we have to fight out. I believe there is a way out, but we have to be prepared to pay the price to get out. Thank you very much. Have a good night.